Hi, this is Dan Albaum. Thanks for listening to Market Impact Insights. And thanks for the positive feedback that's already coming in for my new book, The Giving Edge. Through the compelling real-life stories of 37 remarkable humans who show a giving mindset brought every day gives back exponential returns in business and life, people are feeling inspired. They're feeling motivated on how they can give more of their time, their resources, their intelligence, and their support to others. Check it out wherever you can find books, and I look forward to hearing your feedback too. Now on to this week's podcast.
Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of Market Impact Insights. Today, we're going to take a look at branding, but from a personal perspective. How do we position ourselves out in this highly competitive marketplace? There is so much noise. We've got so many people that are competing in that space, but how do we stand out? How do we do that authentically? How do we do it in a meaningful way that can really position ourselves as thought leaders, as someone to seek for guidance and counsel if you're in the consulting side of the business, if you're a leader inside of an organization, establishing and strengthening your credibility, all of that good stuff that comes with that. And we're going to talk today about that with Noemi Ceapa. And I first met Noemi at a LinkedIn Live event. This was a few months earlier this year. And I was so impressed. She brought a fresh perspective around this idea of how we brand ourselves. And it's really timely to really create more of a competitive differentiation for your own brand. Now, she's the founder and CEO of the Consulting Studio. She's got a lot of experience in really transforming the personal branding for leaders. She's worked with a lot of dynamic women leaders, but also worked with some male leaders as well. And her also has a background in customer insights and strategy at C-Space, and really understanding trends and innovation as a consultant at Mintel. So understanding what's going on in the minds of consumers, but also the people that we want to influence. So she brings all of that into the conversation. Noemi, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I want to start with, you've had a really interesting career journey. What sparked your passion to pursue a more entrepreneurial path around branding and marketing?
I love that question. And there's really two big paths here. One is I don't come from an entrepreneurial family. Business was always like for other people in my family. Like they are the ones who can do something like that. So it's not something I grew up aspiring towards. And then in my career, I really spent all of my time figuring out what makes consumers buy and why. Like what makes people buy, not the theory, but the actual practice. And when I was laid off, I was surprised. I just felt relief. Like I did not expect that. We expect all the typical responses, but like why that?
Right.
And so I took that more seriously. And as I sat with it, I realized I don't want to spend the rest of my career just climbing up, or the rest of my life, climbing up a ladder that someone else put out for me. What if I can use my knowledge in a different way in a new market? So it was more of a triggered path, I would say, not one that I explicitly dreamt of for years. And then once I was in it, I was like, how do I apply this knowledge that was, previously product-based and service-based, and it was, again, for others, it was for tangible products and services. How do I apply that knowledge to myself? I know about standing out and positioning and articulating things clearly, and how do you make people buy, but like, how do I apply that to a person? So that's where all of that compounded with me being my first client and applying all this. And I realized the strongest presence that we can bring, and you mentioned authenticity, is we build it from the inside out. Authenticity in and of itself is not a strategy, just like hope is not a strategy, right? So just posting authentically or creating an authentic website or offer is not enough for us when we are the face of our own business. So what I do
Mhm.
different is I build our brand from the inside out, meaning it needs to be aligned with your identity. It should really feel a natural extension of who you are and your voice. It should be fun to show up in your brand, in your professional self, rather than something constricted that you borrow from, oh, I saw these gurus are doing it this way. Maybe I should try it that way too.
Yeah. And if we're building from the inside out, then that really highlights the importance of having deep self reflection. You've got to start there to understand what those values are as a starting point, right?
Yeah, so the first part there, the work that we do is excavation work, looking at what makes you different. Can you articulate why someone should choose you over 1,000 other people that do the same thing? And aligning yourself with that founder story, with your values. How do you communicate that? How do you continue to message with that? I was just talking with a client the other day about why is it important to message about our values and our approach? And I said, well, I'm a really direct person and I value working with people that can take feedback. So a lot of my clients specifically tell me, well, don't sugarcoat it, just give me the real truth because I want to grow. And I'm like, I specifically message for that. I include that in my social media because I want to work with people like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that alignment is essential, because we are always signaling this is the type of person I work best with. This is the type of work I excel at. And that draws in the right people. But most of us, we don't do it intentionally. We don't do it strategically. So if you're just winging it or just posting authentically or trying to show up authentically, that's not enough. That's still a scattered and haphazard way of like trying to build something solid, but not in a really structured way.
Yeah. And so when you look back on your own journey, what's some of the biggest learning that you've taken from that? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
Oh gosh, the biggest surprise was I thought I was just leaving my job and just starting a business, like it was going to be all the mechanics and all the steps. But what I didn't realize is I was leaving behind an entire identity. Like my entire credibility was borrowed. Well, this is my title as a career person. This is the company
Yes.
I worked for. Everyone recognized the company, big trust. Everyone already trusted that, big resume. But all of that was external and it came from someone else, from my employer. So when I stepped out on my own, I was like, well, do I have credibility? Where does it come from? What makes me different? Like trying to answer all those questions suddenly that we take for granted when we're in our career and in employment. And then when we switch, that shift has been massive for a lot of people in trying to realign and like, well, am I worth $10,000? Am I worth $1,000? How do I define that worth? A lot of these things were an utter surprise for me. I never thought that going from a six-figure job, I'd be asking myself these questions. I felt like a beginner and then having to rebuild that from the inside out. And I see a lot of my clients that have 10, 20 years experience and they're still undercharging because they made that switch, but not consciously. And so we
Mhm.
have to
Yeah.
redefine so many things when we make such a transition. Like if you grew up with entrepreneurial parents or this is your second, third business, great, you've already graduated this. But if you're making that switch and you're in the early years of that, most of us go through that. And I did not expect it. No one ever told me about that. And it was the biggest, like in my first year, I had to coach myself every single day not to give up and to keep going, just take one more step until that became automatic. And like now it doesn't cross my mind. But at first, you have to build your own ladder. You have to build your own steps and your own space to stand on, your own hill to stand on.
Yeah, that's one of the realities, especially when you're out trying to build your own brand. And I found this too, even with my own experience, that there are the inevitable highs and then there's the lows. So you're doing this altitude modulation. You're shifting altitudes, and it could be day to day, it could be within the same day. And so there's kind of a discipline and a resilience and kind of a mental an attitude, right? That's intentional that really is going to be so important to get through those highs and those lows.
Yes, and then you're wearing suddenly all the hats in the business, sales and marketing and
Yeah.
delivery and client relationship, and that was a whole nother like as I left behind a senior role, I was used to being the thinker, not the doer. And suddenly it's like, "Wait, I have to do my own website, you mean? My own landing page?" Like, that felt like, "What do you mean? Like, there's gotta be another way." So, suddenly getting used to all these things and not just doing them and executing them, but learning each one of those in depth, and then social media very different from building your website and landing page versus prepping for a podcast, for example. And all these you now have to do through your own confidence, your own self-worth, your own identity, your own drive.
Yeah. So, what are some of the most common mistakes you see people making when it comes to trying to build their personal brand out in social media?
There are several, but if I had to pick one, it's often starting with content before they know what they stand for. So everyone wants to jump to visibility, but if
Right.
you haven't defined that in yourself first, professionally, I mean, not as pep talk and not as psychological talk, well, how will you be posting? What is it that you want to convey? What type of person, we just talked about, what type of person do you want to bring into your world? How are you positioned in relation to everyone else that does the same thing, says the same thing? Bringing your values, your expertise into it, especially now. I don't know about you, but I'm so tired of seeing the generic AI posts. If you are not part of that with your expertise and you can't claim your space inside a post through your expertise, have your own credibility be there, not on your LinkedIn resume. We don't do resumes, but within that post or that landing page. So before we jump to visibility, have we set our foundation that we can build on solidly? This is the part that most everyone skips because it's fancy, it's sexy to just jump out and, "Ooh, I'm out of the LinkedIn closet." But have you done the work previously to make sure that you are building, whether you like it or not, you're building a reputation. It's just whether you're building it intentionally at this point, and are you setting that foundation for this to be a long-term positive reputation, a strong one, where your expertise is communicated clearly versus are you just posting? Visibility in of itself is not going to work, just like authenticity in of itself is not a
Mhm.
strategy. So it's doing the work before you start saying anything because you're really putting a megaphone on your expertise at that point. And what are you amplifying? Are you just amplifying the noise? Are you amplifying same old, same old? All the AI content looks the same, sounds the same. So if you don't know how to bring yourself into that, you will not be increasing your business through that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought about it as it's the optics of perfection that people sometimes they get into the trap of chasing that, and that somehow I need to come across as being this all-knowing, all perfect, everything is just kind of golden, so trust me, trust me. But I've actually found when you can be vulnerable and actually share your own mistakes and painful learning, that actually that ultimately can gain greater trust from others because they're saying, "Hey, you're just like me. You're going through some of the same struggles." And that's how you create connection. So it seems like getting over this idea of I've got to be perfect, perfect, perfect is a huge one.
Definitely. Those are actually posts that have drawn the most people into my world is like, oh my gosh, that's also me. You're reading my mind. How did you know? I'm also going through that. And it does build trust. So there are several components, but you just highlighted a couple here is one, of course, positioning yourself as an expert, but then two, do I trust you as a person, as who you are? Because I can get this expertise somewhere else as well. But
Yeah.
what makes you the right person for me? What are you like to work with? Because your post is a teaser of what it's actually like to be with you in your presence, to work with you through your service. And that trust is becoming bigger and bigger as we move into AI and everything sounding the same, everything being automated. Is how can you demonstrate that trust and earn it?
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to human to human connection for sure, and building that trust. And you mentioned something in your own personal story, and this is a big one because it's happening so much right now. And you use the word layoff, and you experience that. And there are so many people going through the emotional roller coaster of a layoff scenario, an event in their life. And with so many people being impacted by the layoffs, if they're in that situation, where should they start in terms of maybe coming through that, using that in a positive way to move their career forward? Where do they begin? How do they move forward?
Definitely. That is such an important question. And for some people, the answer might be a career pivot into a slightly different field or a different arena, or a pivot into a business. Either way, before you make that choice, what's been the most powerful for me is do an inventory of your career. Actually understand what you're great at before you touch your resume, before you update your LinkedIn, before you send a single message to your network. You need to be able to answer an important question in your own words without hiding behind a title or jargon or a company name. What do you actually do? Why does it matter? And why should someone choose you? And I've worked with clients also that are continuing on their career path, but they just got stuck where they spent so much time with one particular employer or in one particular industry. And then, we can't read the label from inside the jar. But until we know what is it that we're great at, and I don't mean the title, I mean, what is it that you truly do, and be able to explain that to a recruiter or to a future client if you're going out on your own. So for the person who wants another corporate role, this clarity is really what separates the candidates that get called back versus the ones that kind of get lost in the pile. And for the person that's quietly wondering, well, is this the moment to maybe go independent? It's the same work, it's just a different destination. But start with reassessing everything you've done, not through jargon, but through here are all the components that I've tackled. And that's where I started. One of my big questions was like, okay, well, I have all this knowledge, but it always existed in a career container. How does that, like, there's a gap between there and a new business. What are the skills there? How do I package that? What's the one thing I want to be known for? And it took me longer than I'd like to admit of like actually translating those skills into a new world. But either way, if you want to stay in your career or you're considering starting your own businesses, start with that deep look at what you've done. It might only take an afternoon, it might take a week or a month, but that is valuable time that you're prepping for the next step, whatever shape that will take.
Yeah, that's such an important point, which it really comes down to a very personalized, kind of an individual case by case scenario, because I've worked with some incredible leaders inside of a corporate organization, and they brought everything to the table in terms of being strategic, being very effective communicators, really focused on people and growing people. And jumping outside of that environment may not have actually accentuated their strengths. I may not have been the right move, but for others, it is the right move. So I think it's really important not to get caught up in feeling this external pressure into trying to be something or to be somewhere or to do something that really doesn't click, right? And really accentuate. And it needs to be back to build from within. It's got to be true in terms of what's in your heart, right? And what you really are most in line with.
I'm smiling ear to ear because this actually came from my first business, went utterly nowhere, and I shut it down with having made zero sales ever and like 20,000 just invested into my own training that didn't pay off at that point. Why? I didn't realize it at the time, but I was not aligned with it. I started it for all the wrong reasons, out of fear, out of, oh, this is supposed to be a lucrative industry. It
Right.
was in real estate back in the UK.
Right.
And I burnt myself out trying to chase all these things, and I was trying to buy confidence with every single course and training that I invested into. I was chasing something external. And it's not until, years after I had already shut it down and I recovered from my own like personal image of failure, blah, blah, blah. Once you get over that, you can see it clearly. Oh, it's because it was for the wrong reasons to begin with. It was never going to work in that way with that mindset, with that energy. And that is where, like, today, my business energizes me. Even when I'm tired, I can go an extra mile because I'm aligned with it. But you don't know that until you have that deeper look at yourself. So also when I do this foundation work with my clients, we make sure you're aligned with the business that you're starting. And it's not like half a year into it, you're going to be like, ooh, yikes, did I make a mistake? You
Mhm.
don't want that. You can't afford that in today's market.
Mhm. And so, if we want to build our own credibility and we want to be seen as thought leaders, what are some of the critical steps to do that, to really establish that foundation of thought leadership?
Mm. This is the kind of work that a lot of people aspire to, and not a lot of people are willing to do the work. It is deeply reflective. And yes, you can use AI to start to excavate a little bit of that, but you have to be able to own it. So most people treat thought leadership as content strategy. Like, well, what should I post about? Because it just needs to be seen.
Hmm.
But it's not. It's an identity strategy that becomes then content. Why? Because, well, this doesn't happen in business, but if I woke you up at 3 a.m., can you stand for what you just said the other week or a month ago? It's something you need to be able to embody and to speak to and truly share your own point of view on, this is what I think is wrong with the industry at the moment. This is how we should be doing it different, because a thought leader means you are leading people's thoughts. Doesn't matter if it's 1,000 people or 100,000 people, or you've grown into a really big influencer. And I use that word lightly because a lot of those people are actually have big businesses. They're not just living off of content. But it really starts with, what are some of your beliefs that you stand for, contrarian points of view that you're willing to excavate, and to connect the dots for your reader and or listener to say, here's this new perspective, here's what this means for you. So you are inextricably combined with the statements and the kind of perspectives that you're sharing in your market with your audience. And it's work that a lot of my clients, when I bring this to them, they're like, oh, well, can't we just use AI to write something? No, no, no. If you are to stand for this in your next presentation and podcast and interview, and you can incorporate this in the way you deliver your product or service, that is where the real thought leadership, it needs to be embedded in everything
Yeah.
that you do. And it's part of the bedrock. Take, for example, I really love the example with Cody Sanchez, Buying Boring Businesses. She could talk for hours, and she does, about that topic. But that is where the training, it takes time to uncover, well,
Mhm.
what do we really stand for? What about that topic do we see differently than 90% of the market?
Yeah. And consistency, right? If you're doing that, it's having that cadence and the consistency of your message over time. And it's like building interest, the power of accumulated interest over time, money, but we take it over to our personal brand and just being true. And it feels like with so many things going on that our attention can be diverted, and it doesn't get easy to kind of stick with something because that might feel a little boring. I want to jump over and start talking about some of this other stuff, right, that's going on. And so we're all just darting around. But those that stay the course is what you're saying. Stay the course, be true to yourself. And there's a power that comes from that.
Yes, I'm smiling ear to ear over here because building a personal brand, you can't be tempted by shiny objects. You have to build momentum, yes, and over time you can add new topics to your field of expertise, but you need to start by being known for one thing. And this is where so many people struggle, and they say, oh, but I love all these things and I'm good at all these things. And it's like, yes, we're not reducing who you are as a human being to just one thing. We are choosing depth over breadth. If you want to be known for your expertise and build a reputation, I heard this quote that, or something someone said to me years ago, is building a personal brand is saying one thing in 1,000 different ways until you might be bored of it. but your audience hasn't necessarily caught up to that thought leadership, to that education of how should I think about this thing. And when you're, in your first few years, you need to start with one until that has come to a certain point of real mastery. And it shows in your business as well, not just in followers and likes. It actually translates to revenue. When you've come to a certain place of maturity, then you add a second thing or you change into a new arena. But take some of the really big names like Brene Brown or Atomic Habits or Start With Why, Simon Sinek. These are people that have built a real platform, sometimes for a whole decade, just talking about one thing and different aspects of that one thing. So that thought leadership is not about talking about 100,000 things. It's the one thing through all
Mhm.
these different
Yeah.
lenses. Then you build over time, you add other things, but we can't we can't bring our shiny object to our audience. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, there's so much conversation going on right now and speculation. Where are we headed with AI? How's it changing how we strategize, how we execute in so many areas of business? Where do you think AI is going to have the most significant impact when it comes to how personal brands are developed?
Well, in part, it won't be your friend. It's your friend when it comes to efficiency, but in a couple of years from now, you might not be able to start on your own because there will be so much AI video, AI content. It will be really hard to build credibility. I don't know, Dan, if you've had the experience, but sometimes when I browse on YouTube and I click on a video and I can instantly tell it's not a person narrating, it's an
Right.
automated voice, I tune out. No thanks. Unsubscribe, exit, go to find some other source where it's actually a person. So if you think about whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, doesn't matter which platform you're on, and it will be flooded with especially AI video content. And there might be other ways to even simulate lives or who knows. It will be so pervasive that we won't be able to tell, and it will be so good, we won't be able to tell who's
Right.
real and who's not. So at that point, what is most likely is you will need to partner with someone that is already established credibility to be able to enter. So one of the things for example, when we met and you mentioned we met on a LinkedIn Live, part of the reason why I wanted to start that is exactly for this reason, is to have that history and backtrack to say, this is who I am. You get to know me before this is a new standard. But in a couple of years from now, you might not have the choice of just like forget about posting authentically, but like even posting lives or videos or whatever is working today is not going to help you a couple of years from now because it will be a whole different game.
So we have this window of opportunity right now to really establish clearly what we stand for as leaders and really create that platform and then hopefully leverage that into what I'll call partnership or relationships. It sounds like that's the two-step dynamic you see.
That is one potential. There might be others, but imagine that barrier to entrance is going to be so much higher, and you won't be able to just get your own ticket into the game.
Yeah. And of course it feels like it's changing by the day, by the week, by the month. There's just a real dynamic. And through all of that, though, the end of the day, leadership plays such an incredible role for impact in an organization, whether you're going it alone or whether you're inside of an organization. What do you think separates truly exceptional leadership from just good enough?
I'm combining right now the career path and the entrepreneurial path, and good enough leaders, no matter in which arena they're at, they execute. They get the job done. They manage, they hit targets, they keep teams running and functional. Exceptional leaders, I believe they stand for something specific, for a standard, for a way of seeing the problem. Like that people organize around even when the person isn't there. because you want to live up to that, or you want to
Hmm.
be able to match that expectation. So a leader, we can't reduce it to a word of, is it inspiring, is it motivational, but I like to think of it as setting a new standard and a new vision. And while the title gives you authority of like your CEO or your director of something, it's really the position that gives you the opportunity of influencing someone. And again, coming back to thought leadership, it's not just about content, it's how you actually lead the people through the different situations. So they're not the same thing. And most people never figure out that difference between title and authority and actual real influence and leadership.
Yeah, when we get too infatuated with a VP title or whatever our title is, chief, fill in the blank, and status and hierarchy becomes our primary center of focus, it feels like it's so easy to drift away from really being able to grow your team, from being close to even understanding customer needs, because we're just wrapped up in our own hierarchical status in an organization.
Yeah, part of me really doesn't miss that political game. I believe was the hardest to play, where it's like we're all here to just do great work. Like, can't we just skip to it and skip all the political parts? The world is complex enough, and no matter what industry you're active in a career, and I always just love doing the actual work.
Yeah, get to the heart of it. So, what's the best piece of business advice you have ever received?
I've really thought about this over the years, and a lot of people have asked me, and it wasn't really advice. It was more of a lesson that I had to learn the hard way alone without really a clear roadmap. And I didn't have a mentor who like pulled me aside and said this one big thing that
Mhm.
changed everything, as they say. Um, and as I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family, like nobody handed me a framework for this is what it's like to leave your career and build something of your own from complete scratch. Plus, I'm in a, I wasn't born in the US, so I'm starting from scratch also with no network. But what I had was very expensive education in what doesn't work. So many programs that promised the complete system and then they delivered a few, checklists and PDF. And some of the advice, it's technically correct. It's also totally useless for where you are in your situation with your personal and professional context. So I hid my whole business from LinkedIn for a year because I couldn't figure out like, well, how do I show up? Well, what's my voice? How should I be saying these things? And somewhere in the middle of that, I really stopped looking for the advice and I started to pay attention to what I was really experiencing, and that's where my methodology came from, not from a mentor, but really from my own mess. So if I had to name it, it's the best advice I never received that I wish someone had told me is like, stop trying to find yourself in someone else's framework.
Yeah.
Do that inventory first. Even if you're a business owner, even if you're in a career, even if you weren't layoff, can you really look at everything that you've done, make sense of it, see the through line in everything, see your strengths, know how to communicate that clearly? You have leadership and thought leadership, whether you have an official title that goes along with it or not. And that thing that makes you worth hiring as an employee or as an expert in your own business, it's already in you. And your job is to excavate it, and it's not to copy paste it from somewhere else and call it your own. It's find out what are those strengths that make you unique and make you the strongest. How do they translate to your employer or to your new business and your clients? And that's really the work I help women do.
Hmm. And when you think about the future, what makes you optimistic?
Well, a few things, but we just talked about AI and like everyone assumes like to a large extent, AI is bad news for people in my space. But I think the opposite. And when every person, every employee, every founder can generate a decent post in 20 seconds as they snap their fingers, the one thing that actually differentiates you is the thing that AI cannot give you. It's what we just talked about, your specific perspective, your experience, the specific way that you see a problem, how that should be solved, that new standard that you hold other people around you to, whether it's your clients or your team. And those are the things that are sitting already inside you. Now, AI might help you, play back and forth for a little bit and help
Yeah.
you excavate some of it. But most of the time, we can't see our own expertise because we're too close to it. So, knowing and owning that, it's becoming the most valuable thing that you can do either in your career or as a business owner that you can invest in. And that's actually what makes me optimistic is AI can do a lot of the things that will gain us speed, but not depth and essence. And that still sits with us. And that is really our power of how we earn trust and be seen as a thought leader.
Yeah, it's the incredible power of being part of this vibrant human community, right? And that's the thing that doesn't change, even with the march of AI into everything that we do. I love that perspective. And as we wrap up the conversation, Noemi, do you have any other final advice for leaders that are looking to grow their personal brands and elevate the performance of their teams or their company?
Yeah, the simplest advice that no one wants to hear is stop waiting until you're ready. You're never gonna feel ready. Where you and I met, Dan, actually, that LinkedIn Live, I had the idea like 6 months back before I
Yeah.
actually did it. And I was like, no, I'm just not quite there yet. Let me just read another, prep another course, do another presentation somewhere else. Not yet. And I delayed it. And then 3 months go by and 6 months go by. I'm like, dang it, I don't feel any more ready than I did 6 months ago. The conversation in my head was the same. So then I realized, well, why did I just waste all that time when it never got easier? And the day I did it, I was just as scared as 6 months ago when I first had the idea. So stop waiting until you're ready. It doesn't get easier by planning and strategizing more. It gets easier when you commit to doing it and you actually show up for yourself.
Yeah, that's the exclamation point. Don't wait. Take that next step. Noemi, thanks for joining and reminding us that building our brand really starts from the inside out, and it's authentic and it's meaningful and it's inspirational. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.